If you have any questions in mind, do put it in the chat box. The last 10 minutes, we could take up all of the questions that you have in mind. So let me quickly introduce myself. I am Smriti. I'm a trained pastry chef from Livon Academy, Bangalore. I got the privilege of learning from some of the renowned chefs of Asia. So I thought of extending my knowledge and experiences from the learning there to all of you here. I started my commercial baking journey 3.5 years ago in Noida, and I'm continuing to do the same here. Like I've shifted to Thane, and I'm continuing to do the same. Lately, I've started doing online and offline classes, and with BitClass, it has been 12 months so far, and I've taught almost 45,000 plus students, and I'm looking forward for an interactive and engaging batch and students like you who want to learn further. As Suhina talked about the masterclass, of course, we will be revealing about the extensive class towards the end. You will have to stay tuned for all those details. And she also has got a very big surprise for everybody here. So to know about the surprise, as she mentioned, stay tuned. So we'll quickly jump on to the demonstration. I'll spotlight my other camera. Oh, thank you, Serena. That was very quick. So, before starting off with the layered cake that we have planned for today, I told you we'll be doing a chocolate decadence cake where we will have a chocolate sponge followed by some chocolate fudge frosting that we have planned for the day. We'll quickly start with the sponge, but before starting, we will talk about the theory that you should know before planning and going ahead doing a layered cake for yourself. Now, talking about a layered cake, in a layered cake, it is basically having 4 components precisely. The 4 components of a layered cake are, the first is a sponge. You can go ahead and do any sponge according to your preference. The second component is a frosting, which is the very crucial component of a layered cake. The third component is a filling. Of course, according to your preference, you can go ahead with a fruit filling, some chocolate mud, some chunks of candies, chocolates, anything according to your requirement. The fourth component is a garnish or a decor that you are using for your layered cake. Now, out of these 4 components, there are 3 components which you could prepare well in advance, which means you could prepare in bulk few days ahead, and on the day of assembly of the cake, you set everything and just go ahead and stack a layered cake. Now, out of these 4 components, I told 3 components can be done in advance. What are those 3 components? The first component that can be done well in advance is the sponge. Yes, you could bake your sponges well in advance, and you could keep them, you could wrap them like this in plastic wraps, and you could keep them in the freezer. Why I'm telling you to keep it in the freezer? The freezer is going to ensure that the moistness inside the sponge layers, the sponginess is well hydrated and moist, which means the sponge will not dry out if you are trying to store it in the freezer. Otherwise, if you are doing it in the refrigerator will tend to squeeze away all the moisture and it will make your sponge dry. So you could bake these sponges and you could keep them in the freezer for at least 6 to 7 days down the line. So you always have an advantage of baking it in bulk, keeping it in the freezer and using it for the next 7 days. Now, the next component which can be done in advance is the filling. Any fruit filling, any choco mud, some candy, some syrups, if you want to do as a filling, you could make them well in advance and you could keep it in the refrigerator in an airtight box for another 3 days in your refrigerator easily. Okay, and if specifically I'm talking about compotes, which is another jam or a filling that we are using for a layered cake, if you do it the right way, you could easily stock it up for at least 6 months down the line in the refrigerator. But yeah, you will have to follow a few tips to store it well. Okay. Now, the third component I told you, which can be done in advance, is the decor or the garnishes. If you are doing a chocolate garnish, you could do them in advance and you could use it for 3 months, 6 months down the line, properly refrigerated. If you are doing some fondant decoration, you could make them, dry it out at room temperature and use it for another 3 to 4 months. Sugar arts can also be stored at room temperature and you can use it for another couple of months. So the garnishes can also be done in advance and you could do it and use it for your layered cake. Now, I told about the fourth component, which is the frosting. No, a frosting should not be done well in advance. Why? For the reason that frosting is the most crucial component of a stacked cake. You will tend to lose the taste and the texture of the frosting if you are doing it in advance and you are storing it in the refrigerator for quite some long time. So always do the frosting fresh on the day of assembly of the cake. Now, let's assume that this cake has been lying in the freezer. Now, on the day of assembly of the cake, which means, let's assume in the evening, I'm going to stack a layered cake for me. Now, the first thing in the morning I'll do is, this sponge is lying in the freezer. I will take out this sponge and let it thaw on the countertop. You need to let the sponge come back to its original texture and softness. For that reason, you need to take it out of the freezer and you let it sit on the countertop. It would take approximately 2 to 3 hours completely to come back to its original texture. Once that 2 to 3 hours you could utilize to make your frosting, make the frosting fresh, keep it in the refrigerator to chill for at least 30 to 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, it has achieved a nice spreadable consistency. Take out the frosting, whisk it for 30 seconds to 1 minute till it becomes nice, incorporated and homogeneous. Then go ahead, stack your layered cake. Now, after decorating and stacking your cake, where you should store it? You should store your decorated cake in the refrigerator inside a cardboard box. Why? Otherwise, the frosting will tend to change its texture if you are doing it for longer time and if you are keeping it directly in the refrigerator. The cardboard box will help to retain the moisture inside and it will not dry out your frosting from the outer layer, which is, I told you, the crucial part. So all the theory has been sorted. We'll quickly jump onto the sponge. To prepare the batter, the first thing we'll do is we'll quickly preheat the oven. We will be baking at a temperature of 170 degrees for a time of 35 to 40 minutes. All those who want to note, please make a note. 170 degrees, I'm preheating for 10 minutes. We will bake the cake batter at 170 degrees for 35 to 40 minutes. So I'll quickly turn on the oven and I'll quickly come back and start with the demonstration. Yes, we'll quickly start. So you have already got this recipe ingredient list. For the sponge, we would need some milk. This is a normal full cream milk which I use at home. You could use any milk according to your preference. Even raw milk would do your job here. I have some vinegar. This is a normal synthetic vinegar from the brand Tops. This is in this bowl, I have some oil and sugar together. See, I have some oil and sugar mixture. If you want to replace oil, you could take melted butter also here if you want. Jyoti Jaiswal, you will have to check the ingredient list that I've already shared. Now, I am doing half of the quantity of the recipe ingredient list that I've shared. So this would give me a 350 grams of sponge, approximately. I would use that 350 grams sponge to make a 500 grams or a 1 pound cake. Now, I told you this is a mixture of sugar and oil and vanilla extract. Melted butter can also be used. And oil, which oil to take? It is any unflavored oil which is preferable. Refrain yourself from using some strong, pungent tasting oil here specifically. Now, this is a dry mixture where I have some all-purpose flour, some cocoa powder in the side, and this pinch is a mixture of salt and baking soda. Okay, now to start off, I will quickly give this a good stir because I want the baking soda to thoroughly mix with the dry ingredient. Why we need that the baking soda mixes thoroughly and uniformly? So that there's a uniform reaction taking place. Now we'll come to the reaction that is basically involved with our batter. Now it is roughly mixed, and always sift your dry ingredient at least once. Always. And in case you are using fibrous flours, then at least for 3 times. Okay, so I'll keep this aside. Now I'll quickly start. The first thing we'll do is we will be converting this milk to a buttermilk. How do we get it done? I will be adding this quantity of vinegar inside the milk. Now, I will give it a stir. Now, after adding the vinegar, the milk will start to curdle quickly and it will convert to a buttermilk. Now, can you see some milk solids being separated and almost resembling a curd here? Yes, it is almost like a split milk that we have got. I would, some reactions would help me proceed. So can you see the buttermilk being converted very quickly? Isn't that paneer? No, it is a curdled milk, which is called a buttermilk. In case you don't want to mix this vinegar and milk, you could always take a store-bought buttermilk, but avoid taking masala chance in that case. Now, we'll keep this aside, the buttermilk I'm talking about, and we'll start by combining the oil and sugar together. Now, I'm using an electric whisk for the same. You can easily do this recipe and execute the same result with a normal manual whisk. Now, I have taken some powdered sugar. You could take castor sugar, ghar ki pisi hui chini, anything would do the job here. In case you don't have any of those and you want to use the granulated version of the sugar, make sure you mix and you dissolve the sugar a bit and then go ahead and use it for your batter. Okay? Now, we will be adding this buttermilk inside the oil mixture. This is a normal room temperature milk that I'm using. Now, I will give this a good mix. No, icing sugar would not do the job here because icing sugar generally contains some corn flour. So I'll give this a mix. It is nicely combined. Now comes the part where we'll be adding the dry ingredient into the wet ingredient. Now, before adding the dry to wet, I will tell about the reaction that is basically involved with our nice and spongy cake that we are doing. Now, baking soda has been used in the dry ingredient. It is nothing but sodium bicarbonate. When sodium bicarbonate comes in contact with acids, now acids we are getting from the buttermilk that we just now created. So baking soda plus the acids. Surbhi ma'am, you will have to be patient. I am in the middle of the demonstration. You enjoy the method and demonstration meanwhile. And towards the end, I'll quickly again share the recipe for everybody. Okay? Perfect. Now, I told you baking soda coming in contact with the acid from the buttermilk is going to react, and it is going to produce a gradual reaction of carbon dioxide bubbles. This carbon dioxide bubble will stay intact in the batter while you are baking it, and it is going to give you a nice fluffy and a nice rise, a porous structure that we want for the inside of our sponge, right? So I told you the reaction of baking soda and buttermilk. So a uniform reaction should be there. How do we achieve a uniform reaction? When we add the dry to wet in parts. If we add the whole of the dry to wet in one go, it will produce a very quick reaction of carbon dioxide bubbles, which means it will quickly evaporate and your cake or the sponge will be turning out to be dense. Okay, so we'll add the first batch of dry ingredient inside slowly and gradually. Now, I am going to use a technique called the cut and fold method. I am showing this technique for all those who are new to this confectionery. I am okay and I am comfortable by using an electric whisk. But for everybody who is not pretty much sure how much do you mix, this method is a very safe method. Why? Because you are going to scrape like this, do a cut mark in the middle, scrape, and cut. This is called a cut and fold technique, which we use to mix our batters. Why this technique is helpful and useful? Because it will not mess up with the carbon dioxide that is gradually being produced in your batter. And in case you are incorporating nice amount of air to the batters, it would not deflate the air that you have incorporated. And you will not tend to overmix when you are playing safe with this cut and fold technique. I told you overmixing will lead to a disastrous cake, a denser version. So this will always be very much helpful. GMM, I just now mentioned that I am in the middle of the demonstration. You could enjoy the method demonstration. Meanwhile, towards the end, you will be grabbing the recipe screenshot, which I'll quickly share to everybody. Now, fold like this, cut in the middle, fold and cut. So everybody who is not pretty much sure about electric whisk mixing, go and do this cut and fold technique. Now, I'll quickly finish the batter with the electric whisk. I'll add the second batch of dry ingredient. Done. The third part goes in. The last one. Now, how much do you need to mix your batters? How do you check that? It is always when you don't see any lump of dry flour in your batter, it means you are good to go. Now, we can see some dry flour at the edges. So I'll quickly scrape the bowl and I'll mix for a few more seconds. Done. Looks fine and homogeneous. Now, the recipe calls for some water also. That quantity of water can be added towards the end to adjust the consistency like I am doing, or you could add it with the milk also. I am always adding it with the milk, but today I forgot to add it with the milk, so I'm adding towards the end to adjust the consistency of the batter. So I'll quickly give this a last mix. Done. Now, I like to add a bit of coffee powder also to my chocolate-based confections because I feel a little bit of coffee always intensifies the flavor pretty well. So you could go ahead and add the instant coffee powder also. Now, this batter is ready. It will go inside the cake tin, which I have here, a cake ring precisely. This is a cake ring which I'm using. I've got some parchment paper at the base. Now, look at the consistency we are going to get. or once you try out the recipe, what is the consistency you will be getting? A nice flowing ribbon consistency that we are looking for. Okay. Is everybody with me? And all eyes, I assume, should be on my workstation currently. Or you guys are preparing your lunch and some people must be enjoying it. No? Perfect. Now, this goes inside the OTG. I am using an OTG which is from the brand Morphy Richards. I will be baking, I told you, at a temperature of 170 degrees for approximately 35 to 40 minutes. In case some people would like to bake in an air fryer or a convection oven, in that case, you could bake at a temperature of 180 degrees again for 35 to 40 minutes. I am giving you a time window because every mold machine size would vary the baking time. So after 35 minutes, go ahead, do a toothpick insert test. Insert a skewer or a toothpick inside the batter when it is in the OTG after 35 minutes. If the skewer or a toothpick comes out clean, it means you are done. The cake is done, the sponge is ready. You take out the cake mold, let the sponge be in the cake mold for at least 10 to 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, demold it and keep it on a wire rack so that it completely cools. Please be very patient while you are cooling the cake, because if little bit of warmth is by chance there in your sponge and you wrap it by mistake, your sponge will turn out to be sticky. So cool it completely, then wrap it in plastic wrap and keep it in your freezer. Or if you want to stack it fresh for your layered cake, go ahead and do the same. Now I'll quickly pop this inside the OTG and we'll quickly come back and do the frosting that we have planned. It is a fudge frosting that we are supposed to do. Now, I would quickly tell you the recipe, the ingredient that we would need for the fudge frosting. This is some butter, soft butter. I have some icing sugar and I have some cocoa powder. In this bowl, I have some milk, normal room temperature, cream and chocolate. Make sure when you're using cream and chocolate, it should be both at same temperature. Either is of, like, if the cream is chilled and chocolate is at room temperature, in that case, your chocolate will seize and it will develop solids and granules, which means it won't be consumable anymore. So it is both at room temperature. Which cream to take? It is the 25% fat Amul cream, fresh cream. Yes, Mithu ma'am, it is the fresh cream, 25% fat, blue and white packet Amul cream, which I have taken. Talking about the chocolate which I have taken, it is a Van Houten 46% dark chocolate. From a brand Van Houten, 46% dark, co-virtured chocolate, good quality chocolate. The butter is from the brand Amul. It is a salted batch of butter. You could take unsalted butter also, but I like to use salted butter because I feel a little bit of salt makes your palate feel more and it balances out the taste well. Okay, so for the frosting, I'll come back and discuss about this step. But before that, we will have to melt the cream and chocolate in the microwave in the burst of 30 and 30 seconds. In case you want to use a double boiler, go ahead and melt it on a double boiler. So I'll quickly melt this up. I'll pop the sponge and I will be back with the demonstration. Okay. So I'm putting the recipe ingredient list again for everybody. So done. We'll quickly do the frosting, which is a fudge frosting. Now, what is basically a fudge? First, fudge is basically when you boil milk, some fats for some long amount of time, you would end up with a confection which is sweet in taste, and it would be having a chewiness to it, a bite to it, and it will be like a melt in the mouth confection. So we are trying to replicate the same thing in a frosting here. How do we get that done? Basically, when you try to replicate a fudge in a frosting, in that case, we will have to make a buttercream. Always fudge frosting is a buttercream based frosting where we will prepare a buttercream. Here specifically, we are doing a chocolate based buttercream because we are using cocoa powder. And this buttercream is going to give that bite and chewiness to your frosting. Now, to get that melt in the mouth texture to your frosting, we will be adding in the mixture of cream and chocolate, which I'll quickly melt and show you. So I told you it will resemble like a fudge, which means this mixture of cream and chocolate is going to give it a nice silkiness. The buttercream is going to give it a nice chewiness by providing a nice body to it. Thus, this frosting is called a fudge frosting. So this is nicely mixed. Done. Now we'll start. We will be following a method called creaming, which means you will be incorporating nice amount of air to the butter. Creaming means incorporate nice amount of air to the batter. The batter here is nothing but a combination of butter and icing sugar and some cocoa powder. So we will be incorporating air with the help of electric whisk that I have here. In case you want to do with a manual whisk, you will have to do and work out for some more time compared to the electric whisk. So I'll quickly start. Now, how long do you incorporate air? Till this mixture or this batter, a combination of butter and icing sugar, becomes light and fluffy in texture. Okay, so I'll quickly start. The butter should be a soft batch whenever you are going to make a buttercream for yourself. Now you can see the color is quite light now and it is nice and fluffy. Look at the texture. Now we will be adding the mixture of cream and chocolate. And we will be mixing it till it becomes nice, incorporated, and a nice homogeneous frosting to look at. So I'll continue to mix. So done. Our silky, smooth, fudge frosting is ready. Look at the texture, nice and glossy. Now, once I told you frosting is ideally chilled for 30 to 45 minutes so that it achieves a nice spreadable consistency. Once the consistency is achieved, you take it out of the refrigerator. Remember to whisk it for at least 1 minute so that it becomes smooth. Always keep your frostings covered. Otherwise, the top layer will tend to develop, will dry out, and it will tend to spoil the texture of your frosting. So one more look, nice and glossy frosting is ready. Now quickly, I would tell you about the tools that you would need whenever you are planning to go ahead to a layered cake for yourself. Now, to start off, this white table is nothing but a cake turntable that we use to layer our cake. This is a pastry brush that you see. It is basically used to soak your sponges well. I prefer using simple syrup or plain water. Now, simple syrup is nothing but a sugar syrup that we'll make. How do you make a simple syrup? It is equal parts of water with equal parts of sugar. You boil it for 3 to 4 minutes nicely. Once it is thoroughly boiled, you put it off the heat and you cool it and you keep it in the refrigerator for at least 1 to 2 months easily. In case some people feel that the sugar syrup or the simple syrup is way too sweet, in that case, you could dilute it with a bit of plain water to it, or you could just use plain water as soaking of your sponges. Now, this is a scraper that we use to get clean edges for your layered cakes. This is a knife called as the serrated knife or a bread knife that we'll use to cut nice layers of your sponge. Now, this is a cake board that we use to stack your cake on a cake board, basically. I forgot to get the palette knife. I'll quickly get it. So this is an offset palette knife. It is called offset just because it is slightly bent from here. If you take a straight one, it is called a normal palette knife or a straight palette. This is used to spread your frostings like this evenly on the cake that you are layering. Now, we are already done with whatever we had planned. Now, Suina, are you there with us? Yeah.